Screen. Hey, welcome to the Discourse, folks. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're disappointed that Brandon is not here filling in for Ben, I share that with you. He is, however, taking some very much needed time off. So let's get started with the show. I have got a great panel with me tonight. As always, my producer, Richard Green. Say hello, Richard. When he gets his shot ready.
All right. Yeah, I did not set up my camera very well yet, so I just say hello. Welcome, everybody. I forgot that part. Thanks for joining us. Despite Brandon not being here, we got a great show, and I'm looking forward to it. And make sure to check out the SoundCloud for more stuff if you're really missing Brandon that bad. So I'll go back to Adair for a moment.
All right, thank you. Also joining us tonight is the incomparable Katie Gerholt. Please say hello. I can't actually gesture to you because you're not here, but
it's not an actual panel show, but that's all right. Thank you for having me. It's really good to be here.
See, for all of you critics at home, we are trying to be more inclusive. Help us get guests. And rounding off our panel tonight is, per usual, the person who will not be named because we don't actually like him, John.
How's it going, everybody? I'm here at the Democracy Convention, living in a dorm on Minnesota University campus in Minneapolis. And so far, it's been interesting to say the least. But I'm glad to be making the show tonight, and I'm glad I actually managed to get some Wi-Fi going to do so.
All right, awesome. So we're going to jump right in, and we're going to do the topic that I absolutely don't want to talk about, that I think is pointless, but everyone in my liberal circles, because yes, even on the leftist, I do still hang out with some of you Democrats, and that is the subpoena of Donald Trump Jr. Yay! It's where the sound applause track would go if we had one, but we're not that high budget. So what do you two think? We're going to start, there we go. We're going to start this conversation off with Katie. Katie, what do you think is going to happen? What do you find this to be important? Is it really newsworthy? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I guess it's newsworthy in so much as you have the president's son being subpoenaed 6 months into his presidency. So that at any rate is absolutely newsworthy. But what do I think is going to happen? I really don't have a good response to that. I have no idea. I don't think much is going to come of it, but we shall see. It could be the first step in a much larger investigation, depending on, I mean, his son's an idiot, so he might actually make news with this subpoena.
Fair. John, what about you?
I just think that if they're going to do anything with this grand jury, they have to subpoena financial records that so far they haven't been allowed access to. Otherwise, this is just dog and pony show for nothing. And I think based on like the McGinsky Act meeting that they had, I guess that this is dog and pony show for nothing. I don't think they're going to really go for the financials that we need to see. And those financials that we need to see really don't pertain as much to Russia as they do to oligarchs all over the world. I mean, Trump's businesses were failing. He couldn't get loans from normal backers because he constantly declares bankruptcy and backs out on his investors. So he's gone around the world to investors to basically prop up the Trump empire in recent years. And, you know, those are the people that we need to investigate. But that includes Saudi Arabia, Brazil, China, and Russian oligarchs. And if they don't subpoena those financials, we're really probably not going to see much. Now, I'll be happy to eat those words if it proves that Trump's son was such an idiot that he did something so heinous. But so far from the Russia investigation, I don't see anything. So
I just have to say that usually I would absolutely agree that this would come to nothing, but that's if we were dealing with regular politicians who are smart enough to know not to say, you know, incriminating things. And we have in the Trump family people who aren't very bright, people who aren't very savvy, and people who don't listen to lawyers and other people who do know what they're talking about. So in that regard, I think maybe he'll say something by accident. You just never know with these guys.
Yeah, but the thing that I see, I mean, like the most legal ramifications I can see from the meeting with the Russian lawyer was an FEC violation of an in-kind donation. And so that they can get him on, but where is that going to lead to? It's not going to lead to the ultimate collusion that everyone's looking for. It's going to lead to something embarrassing. And so, yeah, it's important, but the FEC, the way they've been impaneled and the way that they've been acting for the past couple of years, they really don't do anything or go anywhere. And so if that's the crux of it, if this Russia meeting is the crux of it, where he might have gotten documents and dirt on somebody, No. Now, if he said, if we become in power, we're going to lift sanctions or something like that, that's an improper behavior, but I'm not necessarily sure that that amounts to anything other than, it definitely doesn't amount to the level of the Reagan campaign in 1979, or even the Nixon campaign, or even, some of the other campaigns in recent memory. But maybe they'll have something. I don't see it. But then again, I'm the permanent skeptic on Russia hacked the election, so I don't see any of this going anywhere other than letting the Democrats have an excuse to stay in power.
Yeah, and I agree with the idea that typically with most politicians, the grand jury would be where this would end up going nowhere, and I think it still may end up playing that way, and for a lot of the same reasons that you laid out there, which was essentially that they're going to play dumb, and while there may be some sort of criminal thing that you may be able to find a prosecutor that will follow up and take it all the way to the court proceedings and so on and so forth, I think what's more likely is a list of embarrassing things to come out, and this is essentially to be the exculpatory way, and this is a way for Mueller to save his credibility, saying that it's not my fault that we didn't indict Trump or Trump Jr. because I did my job, I did the investigation, and a grand jury came to the conclusion that we don't need to continue, or that a prosecutor looked at the grand jury's indictment and decided that we're not going to pursue this further because we don't think we're going to get a conviction. For a lot, again, it also reminds me of Hillary Clinton's defense against when James Comey mentioned that she was extremely reckless or extremely careless, and that she just didn't know what the classification markings were and those things, and there was no intent to do anything wrong. I think we're going to find ourselves following a very similar path to that, and that essentially what it really boils down to is there anything that Donald Trump can't pardon folks for, and is there going to be something bad enough to make the political will for 13 or more Republican senators to try and impeach Donald Trump, which I think is the far stretch, because I don't think that their bases in their particular locales are going to give them that opportunity. But I'll pass it back to the panel.
Well, I think that all of that also can be set aside if they start subpoenaing financial documents. If that's the case, we're going to see a real investigation.
I mean, with that caveat, I would agree.
So I agree in part with a bit of what everybody said. Personally, I don't think anything's going to happen, right? I mean, we've seen these kind of things happen before. We have a good idea of, hey, he's rich. He's really not going to face any punishment, even if anything did come up. Sure, you have the whole high crimes and misdemeanors thing, but the reality of this is it feels like a dog and pony show to me. Personally, I don't really give two shits about Donald Trump and any supposed Russia connection at this point. I really don't care. I think it's tiresome. I think it's a distraction from actual issues that we have going on in this country. But that's just my opinion. I don't think we're going to see much happen. But just keep in mind that at a grand jury, the saying is a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. So if you don't see an indictment come out of this, keep in mind, and that's probably the prosecutor not wanting an indictment. An indictment is almost guaranteed when you have a grand jury subpoena, because it's entirely in favor of the prosecution. The defense has no real question to defend themselves. Witnesses witnesses don't know what the grand jury's been told previously, so they can't really lie and try to save their own skins or to save the defense's skin. So if there is no indictment after this, it's because the prosecutor simply did not want one. It was all political theater, and the world is going to keep turning because let's be real, the Dems don't want an indictment out of this. So that's my thoughts on this. I just want to go around real quick and see if anybody has any last thoughts on this before we move on to a different topic, because again, I don't see much point in us giving it too much play unless people do have any thoughts that they want to say on this.
I just want to say that I'm glad they're doing the investigation. I want to get it over with so that we can move on from this being a talking point. I don't think they're going to find any criminal collusion or any of the things that they really want to find. They're using it as a scapegoat. They're using it as a distraction, as an excuse. So let's have the investigation. Let's sort everything out, and let's get it over with so we can just move on. 100%
agree.
Yeah.
All right. I'm glad we're all in agreement there. That's
1,000%.
On the
That's
Discourse.
a good point.
Yeah.
We very rarely all agree, so we're going to move on. to something we may not all agree about, hopefully that we don't all agree about, and that is North Korea and the crisis on the peninsula. God, that sounds like an old movie title. But it's a reality right now. So for those of you who do not know, North Korea launched another ICBM-class missile that hung in the air for approximately 45 minutes before landing in the waters off of Japan's exclusive economic zone. Following this, you had honestly what I would only could be described as a scary situation. You had the South Korean military and the South Korean government contact the United States and our government as well as our military, and they discussed a military response to North Korea. Japan also called together their National Security Council, saying that the North Korean threat to their country's safety was real and it's there, it's happening, it's something that needs to be taken care of, it's real, needs to be addressed. Personally, I think it's a lot of posturing on the North Korean side. According to some analysts and some experts, they feel that this latest ICBM they launched could in fact hit cities on the West Coast, including Seattle, Los Angeles, San Diego, etc. Someone on the West Coast, I'm not too troubled by it. But before I go into detail, I would like to get the reactions from my panel. I'm actually going to start off this time with the producer, Dre. Go ahead and speak up.
Okay. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, you weren't expecting that, were you?
No.
Curveball. But Brandon's gone is anarchy.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, I mean, I'm concerned in general, just because I feel like there's a lot of economic actors that see either a Cold War or warm war or escalations of military conflict as a strong or as a viable way to get out of the economic slump that we've been experiencing despite the Dow hitting record highs. The fundamentals of the economy have been rather weak despite speculations on improving situations and such. And so anything that looks like military escalation concerns me. So whether it's talks about what we're going to get into, whether we're going to get into another Cold War with Russia or whether something's going to happen in North Korea, I get concerned. I think we need to reconsider what we're going to do with North Korea, because our plan was basically to starve them out, and China said, no, we're going to keep them alive long enough to produce this nuclear weapon, and then we're going to see what we're going to do afterwards. And so far, China has been saying that, well, everything in the world's a little crazy, so we're going to let North Korea be a little crazy too, apparently, is the best I can read. And so I don't know where it's heading, but it definitely has me concerned. That's where I'm at.
And so we're going to pass the ball over to Katie, the special guest, because nobody really likes John anyway.
Oh.
Story of my life, man. Story of my life.
Well, I mostly agree with what's been said already. I'm not that. There are other things I'm more concerned about than North Korea, and correct me if I'm wrong, but throughout the years, through the Obama administration, they do missile tests and shows of force like this quite often. Maybe they haven't gone quite so far. Maybe the technology is improving, but it seems like the North Korean government is a lot of bluster and not a lot of...
Katie is experiencing an electrical storm, so there may just be a bit of lag, or she may have been disconnected altogether. So we will go from there. But go ahead, Adair.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to give it to the white boy for once. John, you can speak while Katie is frozen.
Okay, and then
it's not your turn.
I fully understand and agree to the terms. I'm more concerned about our response to North Korea than I am concerned about North Korea's use of missiles. You know, Noam Chomsky has said numerous times that North Korea over the years has behaved in a completely rational manner, and it was the Bush administration that basically stymied all talks about de-escalation and dismantling of the nuclear program. And then Obama continued that policy. So today I saw an article by John Bolton in the Wall Street Journal advocating for a first strike and invasion of North Korea. And what I see with that is you're going to basically put North Korea into a corner where their only response is going to be to attack. And they're not going to attack us. I mean, they might, but really their target is going to be South Korea, and millions of people will die. So I don't see North Korea as the threat. I see the neocons who are basically pushing for an invasion, a first strike, something along those lines in North Korea as the problem. And that's not to say like, oh, I support the North Korean government. I don't. I see them as being more rational than our neocons in the U.S. government, who see regime change, first attack, first strike, limited engagements as the first option that should be available rather than diplomacy. I mean, look at what they did to the Iran deal this week. It's just, why is it that we are constantly pushing for that? And why is it that it's always the same goddamn people who are given the airtime to push for that? So that's where I stand on North Korea.
I think it's a very fair position. To clarify from some of Katie's earlier comments, North Korea does in fact launch missiles, not with this level of regularity and not with such rapid advancement as they've had in their technologies. I believe during the Obama administration, they launched 4 or 5 different missiles, all of them from stationary launch pads, all of them using, I believe, liquid fuel as opposed to solid fuel, none of them of the ICBM class. So there have been incredible advancements. I mean, we're talking advancements that experts were saying would take about 10 years for them to achieve, all in the span of a few months. I mean, we're talking going from the July 4th launch to now an ICBM, which I believe was the first time they reached an ICBM class missile. That missile had the capability of striking parts of Alaska and Hawaii. We are now talking about a missile that has the ability to hit the mainland, that has the ability to hit Seattle, has the ability to hit LA, and possibly hit a little bit further than that. We do know that North Korea's stated goal is a direct attack on the United States, particularly on the East Coast. And I'm just getting word from Katie right now that her power went out. We do feel very bad for her. So we'll try to get her on next week. So that all being said, I don't feel North Korea is that big of a threat. I really, truly don't. I am, however, very much more concerned of a preemptive strike, of a military response to North Korea right now. North Korea is a lot of huster and bluster, and the fact of the matter is we have such a technological advancement. Excuse me, can't speak tonight. We're much more technologically advanced than North Korea. That's the long and short of it. It would not be so much of a war as it would be a massive loss of life, as John stated, in North Korea, because if they did develop a nuke, that is the easiest place for them to attack. Regardless of whether or not we have the THAAD missile system, it would be either Korea or Japan, not likely to be the U.S. So what is being positioned, though, is this idea that regime change is good, right? North Korea has huge exports of coal. That's what they rely on. That is what their economy is relying on. They rely on their trade with China in coal to keep even moderately afloat. So from my position right here as a communist in America, and I openly say that I'm a communist, we see this idea that that regime change for the sake of getting natural resources from North Korea is probably on the board. We just had reports of Trump talking about he wants to fire or remove the head general in the Middle East right now because he believes that he's not winning. He also asked about, can we take Afghanistan's natural resources? So I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a regime change war, and it's going to be a natural resource war. I don't know how we avoid that. What do you two think?
Honestly, I mean, if Richard, if you don't mind, I don't think we're going to avoid it. I think that with all of the parties and the way that they're positioning themselves and the way that even the resistance is positioning itself, we're getting to a point where we need to escalate, and we're going to escalate so that we can prove, I don't want to say our might, but prove that we're still invested in the imperialism that we've been pushing for a long time, and that we will back it up. We're, with the way that we've fucked up in Iraq, fucked up in the Middle East, all over, we really need to show a quote unquote win, even though none of these things are actually a win. It's just we need to flex our muscle. And I think that that's what's going to happen. And whether it's Korea, a full-on attack in Syria, or maybe even Venezuela now, like I just see every single step that led up to the Iraq war and all of the bluster from the usual suspects going. And now we have a president who's being painted into a corner politically, whose only time he gets any positive press is when he bombs something. So I just see that this escalation is getting out of hand, it's getting out of control, and we don't have rational actors acting on the national stage in any of these governments.
Richard, did you just want to say after that? I think that's actually it's really poignant analysis right there, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's basically what I've been, more or less what I've been thinking as well. And that didn't do much to assuage my concerns. But essentially, there's too many people that all the players are in line for this. You have the economic actors that see the easy benefit for them. You have the military industrial complex in general. You have Donald Trump, who is, like you said, the only positive praise he gets is when he bombs someplace. And you have a Democratic and Republican parties that align 98-0 for sanctions against Russia, continuing to try and escalate and prove that both Russia isn't in charge of the United States or something to that degree, and that essentially, as you mentioned, that we're going to stand behind our imperialistic history and continue to pursue it, despite what's obviously a swelling fervor among the far left, or however you want to characterize it.
The American left?
Yeah.
Please don't include us in this war-hungry... Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
Katie's back!
Oh, Join's back, so I will get that.
Kim Jong-un must have cut my feed.
She's back. We're so happy to have her on again. So please, continue your thoughts on North Korea, and then we will kind of not so much rehash what we've been saying, but I would like to get a little bit of back and forth since she kind of kicks a lot of ass. You should follow her on Twitter, by the way, @LizetteJones.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, she's badass.
So what I was saying before was that I think there's a lot of bluster there. I'm not sure how many more missile tests they've done. I'm sorry if you've talked about this already. I'm not sure how many missile tests they've done in past administrations, but I remember hearing about them on a regular basis. And I understand that the threat seems magnified because we have a child running the country. But on the other hand, he's got a lot of very experienced military people around him to kind of, I don't know, corral that sort of thing in. And I'm just not that concerned about it overall.
I mean,
what have you guys said?
That's more or less what a lot of us think. We do, however, feel that there is going to be a nuclear strike, or not a nuclear strike. There's going to be a preemptive strike of some sort, some kind of military intervention by the United States into South Korea. That does open up another can of worms, though, considering that South Korea does have that, but North Korea has that in-kind defense treaty with China. So basically, if we go to war, if we commit any act of war against North Korea, we are there by proxy declaring war on China. So that for us, I think, complicates matters a little bit. I do think that U.S. oligarchs are going to continue to push for war, period. It's profitable. It's what makes them billions and billions of dollars. I do think that there's going to be some resistance on the left. But to clarify your earlier point, and I said this, but just probably you're here for it too, they did launch missiles during the Obama administration, but I believe it was only 4 or 5, and usually maybe 1 or 2 in a year. Recently, they've launched, I think, 6 or 7 just this year within the span of less than a month. From their first ICBM to one that could reach, the first one being able to reach Alaska, parts of Alaska and Hawaii, to one that can now reach the west coast of the United States, possibly even a little bit further than that.
The reason that I think that a lot of these oligarchs won't push for this particular war is because of China. That's why you see the Trump administration, as ham-handed as they've been, they're trying to kind of separate the ties between North Korea and China, because if they get China to abandon ship on North Korea, then it's free for all in terms of starting wars with North Korea. But while they have China on their side, I'm just not very concerned that we're going to do any kind of intervention.
Richard, John, do you guys have anything else to say in light of that? Because I don't think we talked about that while Katie had to drop out.
I think Katie's right. I think that, you know, the hot war in North Korea is predicated upon the fact of getting China to basically back away. But we've been working on that position as a country and as a foreign policy for decades. So,
yeah, the likelihood of that transpiring in the immediate future is low. I do think over the next 4 to 6 years, there's going to be a lot of arguments over what is an act of war, not just with North Korea, but with a variety of nations around the country, or around the world. And I do think that they will be part of that conversation, most likely with electronic hacking attacks and things of that sort.
So, here's what I see happening, and because we didn't talk about the China aspect of the war, I still think that the U.S. has some type of strike while North Korea is aligned with China. And the reason why I think this is simple, because America needs to show its might. Right? America has this infantile need to say, I'm the biggest, I'm the baddest, you're going to do what I say. So North Korea is a soft target. North Korea is a soft target with lots of natural resources and coal. China, however, and this is how I think they spin it, China is a threat economically. So a lot of the U.S. oligarchs are like, we can make some money with China, but we could make more money with China out of play. The best way for China to be out of play is to take China to war. There's already been a lot of posturing with the Chinese military, including jet flyovers, Trump flying New Age bombers over the South China Sea, among other things. So that posturing has already began, and I think it's at a level that we haven't seen with past administrations. So that being said, I think a lot of the oligarchs are going to, they're going to push a war with North Korea, knowing that by proxy they're going to start a war with China. So this is the way of starting a war with China without actually having to go and declare war on China itself. China's going to declare war on us. Then we can say in the international arena, we're just defending ourselves against China because North Korea threatened us with nukes. So we're trying to save our own people with South Korea, and now China's getting involved, and China's actually the bully, not the U.S. That's how they're going to split it on an international level. I do think at the home level, though, because so many manufacturing jobs have gone to China, Trump is going to feed red meat to his base and say, we have to attack North Korea, and if China attacks us, then we can finally start bombing the shit out of China and bring some of our manufacturing jobs back. Because that's what he's going to sell. 1940s-esque world where he thinks war means manufacturing jobs. He knows war means money, but he can sell this to the base. He can sell this to Middle America where the factories were and say, we'll rebuild your factories because we're at war with China, because China's a big bully. I didn't do anything wrong. I just attacked North Korea. North Korea just wanted to kill us all because they hate our freedoms. We're going to see a lot of that same retired rhetoric. We're going to see it tied to economic reason. We're going to see a lot of economic reasons behind it. Whereas with the Middle East, we saw a lot of, well, frankly, we saw a lot of racism behind it. Racism fueled the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think it's going to be economics that really fuel this war coming with North Korea and by proxy China. What do you guys think?
I don't think it will escalate to the point of China, and I don't think that they're going to use it as a crutch. I mean, most of our financial institutions are heavily vested in China as it is. Most of our companies that are international are heavily vested in China. Most of our pharmaceuticals are heavily vested in China. Like there's too much of a cross, I don't want to say cross-contamination, but there's too much of a cross current of capital invested in both countries that will prevent that worst case scenario of China being involved. But I do see if there's going to be a hot war in North Korea, China will back out for those exact same reasons, because of the fact that their capital is so invested in us, our capital is so invested in them, and it's incestuous at this point. Honestly, going forward in looking at a future, the future that I see based on the economic integration of the two countries is more along the lines of Firefly, where we're going to integrate cultures mostly because capital has been integrated as well. And so if
you mean with
the
communist
US,
China, what?
Yeah, exactly. But they're not really, I mean, yes, they're communist, but it's a capitalist communist kind of amalgam right now. So
well,
yeah,
politically, especially at the local level, the engagement is kind of ridiculous. Like you would presume that there wouldn't be the type of like democratic engagement, but there actually is at the local level in a variety of provinces within China. So China is not exactly as it's painted towards us, not so dissimilar than what I imagine it was like during the early 80s and 70s with Russia and the US, of the images that we painted of each other.
Yeah, and you look at most of the economists, like one of my favorites is when you talk to Mark Blythe about it, and he talks about China being a black box, where the economy is essentially you're putting a whole bunch of capital in, but because the state controls the banks and they control what type of information is getting out, you don't necessarily know exactly what their economy is doing. So you're betting into a black box by pulling a slot machine almost. But for the past 15 years, 20 years, it's been paying out. And so we've been doubling down. And I don't mean that we, like as in, the everyday U.S. citizen, but I do mean that we as in every capital institution that we have.
Other than unless you're invested in a 401k or some sort of
right.
mutual fund,
yeah,
in which case you probably are invested in China.
or invest in a company that's heavily invested in China. So because of the integration, it's much greater than what we saw during any periods of World War. And I think that is going to be something that will prevent an all-out conflict between the U.S. and China. But I do see a conflict between between U.S. and North Korea, and China kind of backing away from North Korea as a direct result of that integration.
Well, it was an intentional act to try and link economies after World War II to prevent precisely the types of hot wars that we're talking about now.
Yeah,
and so,
exactly.
But the problem
and it's worked.
And what it does, though, is it does change it doesn't stop the conflict. It just changes the grounds of which the conflict takes place. And so what we've been having is economic conflict with China for decades now, and it's been a mutually beneficial conflict.
Yes,
as many of these have been.
And on top of that, I mean, there's you look at some of the people like Matt Stoller has reported on this too. I mean, India and China were the dominant economies before.
One second, guys. We're going to talk. I feel we're going to talk about this all night. So I do want to cut this conversation a little bit short. I'm going to give the last word to Katie because I do want to move on.
Okay.
I just want to say kudos for the Firefly reference, and I totally agree basically with everything that John just said, because our economies are so intricately linked. The value of the dollar is linked. Everyone, whether you know it or not, has some sort of link to the Chinese economy, and I don't think there's going to be an all-out war. Like you said, we might do some kind of spycraft or surveillance kind of thing, and have like a cyber war maybe that escalates. But as far as declaring all-out war on China or North Korea, for that matter, I can't see it happening in the near future.
All right, I agree with that. I think this was a very productive conversation. So we're going to move on now tonight to our next topic. Drum roll is not available because, again, it's not that high production. But if you want to help us get to that high production, we do have a Patreon link down at the bottom. It's patreon.com/expand the discourse. Shameless plug, and I'm kind of good at it. Next
topic. Shout out to all the people that are already patrons. You guys are great, and you
are.
Keep the lights on.
Seriously.
Way to cut my flow, Richard. No, I'm just playing. I do appreciate all of our current patrons. We're going to talk about Kamala Harris. Yay!
Yippee!
I'm going to give the first word to Katie on this one because she did talk to me about it in the DMs, and hoping that this would be a conversation we did have. So you guys give a big shout out to Katie for that, and yeah, please take it away.
Well, I wanted to discuss how Kamala Harris is being discussed in the press and by pundits and on social media. We all knew that the establishment Democratic Party would have their chosen one candidate. We kind of cycled through a bunch of potentials, and apparently right now they've settled on Kamala Harris. And the thing that I have a problem with is not that they've chosen their candidate, their potential nominee for 2020. It's not that there's buzz or even the fluff pieces, these insipid fluff pieces written about how great she is. The problem that I'm having is that anyone who questions her from the left, who questions her background, her stance on the prison industry, the war on drugs, many other things, get called racist and sexist. It's like they're using people of color as a shield to deflect any substantial conversation and questions around policy issues. And so I just wanted to throw it out there to discuss with all of you. I wanted to get your points of view on it, because it's troubling me a lot that this is the direction that they've chosen to go this early on.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead. John, what do you think on that? I don't want to, because I've got a lot of thoughts on this, so I want to make sure everyone else gets a chance to talk before I go ahead and pull a Brandon.
It's happened to me numerous times, and it's even happened to me from fellow leftists, where like I will criticize the fact that they're using her identity as a shield for her policy, and I will be called out for that. And while you all know I'm indelicate, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm coming from a position of, harboring any type of deep-seated racism. I mean, we've talked before, based on my background, there's going to be problems with any way I see race just because of where I grew up, how I grew up, but I've worked my entire life to try and address that and to try and change. But at the same time, it wasn't from, the typical Trump supporter racism. It was more along the lines of typical lib racism. And so for me, it's really problematic when I say, hey, Kamala Harris failed to prosecute One West, and then its owner fronted her at events for her Senate run and donated to her campaign and put her in touch with every mega donor that he had, as well as, you know, the only time that Munchin has ever donated to a Democrat was to Kamala Harris. And then on top of that, her talk on prison reform and prisoner labor. And then on top of that, her talk about trans rights. She's very problematic for a progressive. And her economic policies are, at this point, as far as I can tell, non-existent, other than the only thing that I've seen that even ties into where I am on economics is her talking about free college tuition, and she's even talked about means testing that. And so all of a sudden I'm talking about these policies that she backs and these actions that she's taken in the past, and I'm called out for being a Bernie bro white racist. And it's like, I didn't say anything other than policy. I don't know her. I don't know who she is. All I know is the things she's done and the policies she's pushed. So how is it racist that I don't like her when I've been pushing for Nina Turner to run for president for 2020? And on top of that, it's like, then I'm backed into that position of saying, well, I back Nina Turner. And it's like, well, I've capitulated to the identity argument on their terms. So I don't necessarily know how to address this. It's really pissed me off in numerous times in numerous conversations, because I feel like the argument is not being had on my terms or the terms that the left really wants. It's being had on the terms that the neoliberals want, and I don't know how to change that.
And the whole point is to stifle the conversation. I'm seeing a lot of social media posts and even articles in major media outlets that are grouping together Kamala Harris with Cory Booker, with Deval Patrick. I've even seen them group Joy Reid, Neera Tanden. Any person of color, specifically woman of color, no matter who they are, no matter what their background is, no matter what their profession, whether they're elected official or not, all of a sudden gets grouped in with Kamala Harris for one reason and one reason only, because they are a woman or person of color. And then they use those groupings of people to then say, oh, well, look at all these women of color that Bernie bros don't like. That's because they're racists and they're sexists. And it just shuts down the conversation before it begins. It's just incredibly troubling, and I'm going to be quiet now.
No, I personally agree with you, Richard, before I go on, because again, I'm going to pull a serious Brennan here and probably talk for a good 15 minutes. I just want to make sure that you get your thoughts in real quick, because I don't know how much time at the end after that's over. So,
I mean, I paid attention to Kamala Harris as she was coming up when she was still a prosecutor and was starting to run, and I looked at her as when I was becoming more politically active and stuff, and thinking about how can I reach out, how can I help people, how can I be more engaged in this process. And so, you know, she was running for higher office, and so, or senator, or for Senate. And so I was like, you know, what do I think about her? And I started to look into it, and I was like, wow, this is the best option that they have for the left in that area. But I don't, this is before the whole Hillary thing and before all of that. So like, I hadn't really had my come to realization moment with what the liberal left and versus the far left, or the leftists and so on and so forth. I hadn't quite understood what that meant within the Democratic Party in the context of our political atmosphere today. And so I was always going to have a problem with her. Like before, like I had a problem with her when she was running to be in California Senate, and I don't even live in California. So like my issues go along, don't have anything to do with Hillary or anything. It has to do with exactly what John was pointing out, the policy things that she was doing and what she was representing as a prosecutor. And the type of
just the fact that she was a prosecutor. What kind of progressive is a prosecutor?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's a red flag for me right away. Like I just because of how I understand our legal system and how from what I've gathered from it, it's hard for me to reconcile a moral existence and being a prosecutor, just because of how our system works, not just on the concept of that, you know, trying people for law or violations of law, but the way our system works, it's hard for me to reconcile being moral and being a prosecutor. I know some people are able to do it, and for them that we're safer sometimes, but they screw up a lot, and that would weigh heavy on my conscience, and they seem to be able to sleep well despite that. So I did my little rant. You can go ahead, Adair, and get it.
So first and foremost, before I actually get into some of my own thoughts, I'm going to answer a few questions that we got in the YouTube live chat. So Nuke says 2020 is a long way away. They should be focused on winning the midterms. You're right. They should be focused on the midterms. But what the fuck do the Democrats actually give a shit about winning for? That idea saying they should focus on the 2018 midterms is basically like me saying, hey, I know I should focus on my homework, but fuck that. I'm going to go get shit-faced at the bar instead. Why? Because I goddamn can. That's what the Democrats do. That's how they view the world. So that's why they're not focusing on the midterms. There's your answer to that question.
Yeah, if Russia's not running against somebody in the midterms, and they're not paying any attention to it.
Yep. And I think we lost Katie, by the way.
Yeah.
I do too. It's unfortunate if she pops back. We would love to have her. If not, she's absolutely amazing. We really do appreciate her coming on. We will try to book her again next week, so hoping that there's no technical difficulties. Continue on to another question. Denny, and I'm probably going to pronounce your last name wrong, Demochka, I mean, that didn't work for Hillary. Why are their strategists thinking this will work for them? And talking about Kamala Harris, because she has the same strategists. They're the same people. They don't change. They don't fire anybody. It's the same goddamn people over and over and over. Asking the Dems to learn something is, it's impossible. They don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. And the sooner we recognize this, the sooner we stop giving them any money, the sooner we stop giving them any goddamn airtime is a great goddamn day as far as I'm concerned. It's the day we take a fucking step forward. But that's beside the goddamn point.
Wait, to add to that, Zuckerberg just hired Joel Benison from the failed 2008 campaign. Like, what the fuck?
And so the last one I'm going to go with tonight is unspoken voice inside me. And this is before I just go into my own thing. These are just things I saw that I wanted to address. Unspoken voice inside media said, Kamala is a Clinton front. White people need to just go after her on the policy and laws. They only reflect same neocon government with the elites as the pecking order. That's what we're doing. And I mean that just as the left, not just white people, but the left is attacking her on her position, on her stances, on her, the fact that she's a neoliberal piece of shit. They're garbage. They're running this entire country to the ground. But guess what? When people are using the fact, when people are weaponizing identity, and it's not just that Kamala Harris is doing this, it's that the American left does this. American left is the gatekeeper. They play gatekeeper identity politics. They say, well, guess what? You can't actually dislike her because of her policies, which are absolutely shit, right? Her policies are shit, don't get me wrong. But they say, no, you can't possibly not like her because of that. You have to not like her because she's black. No, I can hate her because she's got shit policies. That's a fact of the matter. Just because your head's so far up your goddamn ass that you can't see the fucking reason doesn't mean the rest of us can't. She is garbage. She's garbage. She's trash. She's the same thing. Again, she's Clinton. She's Clinton. She's just goddamn brown. And being brown doesn't make her a fucking superhero. It makes her a shitty brown person. That's it. That's all there is to it. You cannot sit up here and tell me, oh yeah, I'm a prosecutor. I'm going to send innocent black people to jail in this unjust war on drugs, among other things, and then sit up here and tell me you're a goddamn liberal. Shut the hell up. Shut up.
No, she can tell you she's a liberal, not a progressive.
No, she can't say she's a goddamn liberal. You're not liberal. The war on drugs is not a liberal position, period. Nobody, and let's just move a little bit further. The simple fact of the matter, she's going to be a shitty candidate no matter what her politics are because she's a goddamn capitalist. End of fucking story. When you vote for capitalists, you're voting against your own self-interest. So I'm sorry, stop trying to shove these people down my damn throat, DNC, because I'm not going to goddamn vote for them. In fact, I'm going to do everything I can to work against them. This whole idea of, oh my God, I get to decide what identity politics means. I get to decide what blackness is. You don't get to weaponize my own identity against me because I'm telling you your politics are shit and they hurt black people. Your politics are shit and they hurt poor white people. Your politics are shit and they hurt the global south. Your politics are shit and they hurt everybody who's not rich and white. That's where your policies goddamn hurt. But no, it came from a black woman. So I must be a goddamn racist, right? I must have some serious internalized racism because I happen to not like a black woman. Let me go ahead and tell you real quick what that is, white liberals out there who continue to feel like this is a good line of reasoning. That's racism right there. Well, you're black and she's black, so you two must go together. No, that's not how it works. We're not a homogenous block. She's a piece of shit, and she will always be a piece of shit so long as she's a capitalist and has the same goddamn policies. Fuck that shit. End of story. Now,
tell us how you really feel, though.
I think, honestly, that was your best goddamn rant that I've ever heard. Thank you.
You're welcome. But I'm going to continue on with this because it's just seriously a goddamn issue that we're facing. The simple fact of the matter is, I hear this from, and we're going to transition now into the Democalypse. That's going to continue into the second hour of the show. Real quick before I get into this a little bit, big shout out to the big bro Ben for letting us be on the channel. Please
probably
check him out.
Again,
subscribe, like, do all that other points. So probably never again. I done told y'all they done fucked up. I'm the Eric Andre of political talk show host. I'm telling you right now. Anyways, we're gonna get into Democalypse real quick because
Democalypse?
Democalypse, as in they're continuing to ruin the planet. Because we've seen here in Seattle, we've seen some of these same kind of things, right? We've seen the weaponizing of identity politics. We've seen what the neoliberal agenda does, and so this is part of why I'm so why I get so angry. When I talk to capitalists who sit here and say, well, you know, those people in flyover country, they always vote against their own self-interest, but I never do. Democrat. That is inherently against your self-interest, right? So here in Seattle, we had the mayoral race. It finished up on August 1st. You can check our SoundCloud. We had an interview with the candidate. Her name is Nikita Oliver. Hopefully, she can pull off a come-from-behind win for second place. But we'll see we'll see how that goes. Anyway. We had a candidate by the name of Jenny Durkin win, right? She won the primary. We're a top 2 state, so whoever gets second place also want to get in the general. But she got 36%, I believe, of the votes. Jenny Durkin is described as the classic Seattle, and actually I want to, because I quoted this before, so I'm going to pull up a blog post here real quick. So give me just 1 second. I apologize so much for this, but she's got a very, very interesting, very specific description about just who she is as a person. Further, so this is from our live blogging of the mayoral race. Per the Stranger, their piece on Jenny Durkin says, quote, she speaks the language of Seattle politics. Incremental progress. She is literally the worst possible candidate that we could choose, but she's actually the Democratic establishment. She is the continuation of neoliberal policies. She is Kamala Harris at the local level. Seattle right now, this neoliberal haven is facing a state of emergency around homelessness. Has a police force that is one of the most brutal in the United States, and recently just killed another black woman in our home after she was a victim of a robbery, and made her children step over her dead body. That is reality of Seattle politics right now. We are seeing in Seattle the skyrocketing of rent. There is no affordable housing. A micro studio will cost you more than $1,200 a month in cheap areas of Seattle. We are seeing neighborhoods that were historically black being gentrified by the white liberal class who move into a black home only to put up a Black Lives Matter sign. Capitalism does. Seattle is crumbling. The economy in Seattle is crumbling. There is a mass purging of people of color and the working poor from Seattle and its greater metropolitan area just because of these neoliberal policies. Because too often we capitulate to their corporatist overlords, because as far as they're concerned, they would rather have Amazon sit in their goddamn city limits with all that tech money coming in and nobody goddamn live there. It's elitist, it's garbage, and it's the future of what's coming to this country if we continue to let Democrats do what they're doing. The Democrats are running this country into the ground, and Seattle is a prime goddamn example thereof. I'm going to go ahead and take a break real quick. I'm going to let John and Richard get into this because I've been going on for quite a bit.
Well, I don't have anything to add on local, but maybe Richard does.
I wanted to mention, I could imagine some people maybe taken a bit back by Adair's vocalness and such, but when you think about, if you think about the atrocities that are done in capitalism's name, if you think about the horrors and the suffering that are being caused or being ignored for sake of political expediency or political advantage over one race or this thing, or to be able to get some petty advantage or talking point, and you see this class of elite people that are separated from that suffering and think of it as a game and talk about it as a game and discuss it and at their dinner parties over glasses of wine while they're at each other's weddings or parties or whatever, and talk about how funny it is, the fights that they're having and all of that stuff. There are people suffering, there are people dying, there are people in deplorable conditions. It's atrocious what we allow to transpire in this country, and we should all be as angry as Adair is all the time, basically. All the time whenever we talk about politics. We should always be at that level, and the rest of the politicians should be scared that so many of us are taking it to that tone. And that's where I'm at personally. So I just wanted to speak to that quickly.
I gotta hop in real quick. I'm sorry, John. I gotta hop in. I have to. So there's two things that I really gotta go ahead and get on real quick. So A, Someone, Nuke again, said, I heard most of the black people had to move down to Tacoma. Most of us already lived in Tacoma, Lakewood, and South King County. We're being kicked out of those areas because gentrification is affecting the entirety of the metro region. That means Tacoma, Lakewood, Federal, Kent, et cetera, all these smaller cities, people of color and poor in the working class are being forced out because they are so inexpensive, even for tech workers now, that these cities, these bastions of multiculturalism and just actual working class viability are no longer able to exist. Why? Because of neoliberalism. Secondly, and I'm not going to get too deep into the local politics, Robert Fenwick said Jenny Durkin got the conservative vote. Progressive vote was split among other 5 principal candidates. No, the fuck it wasn't. I'm going to go ahead and let you know that right now. The fuck it was. Jenny Moon is not she's not Jenny Moon, whatever her name is, Carrie Moon, whatever. She's Jenny Durkin light. It ain't happening. It's not, like, it wasn't split. What happened in Seattle is what we see with Democrats all over the country. You have self-satisfied, elitist, wealthy Dems in self-interest. And somehow being able to convince the poor, the working poor, people of color, and every other marginalized group that somehow, if the candidate that is a Republican light is going to give us what we need, is going to continue to capitulate to their corporatist overlords. And in this case, she had the bona fides of, I was a favorite of Christine Gregoire, who was a former Washington governor, who's also a neoliberal piece of shit, and Barack Obama, if y'all know me, y'all already know I don't like Obama. I really don't like him. So that's not a really good place she wants to go. So no, there was a few actual leftists in this race, including Nikita Oliver, including Bob Hasagawa. Neither of them were able to win. So no, Seattle chose neoliberalism. Seattle is so infatuated with neoliberalism. It's like South Park. It's that South Park episode, right? It's that smugness. It's that smugness of being, oh, I'm so much better than you. That's what Seattle likes to think of itself. That's what neoliberalism thinks to itself. And that's the Democrats offer the rest of this country. They offer you a lack of funding for your schools if you're a person of color or marginalized group. They offer you the opioid crisis with no actual plan to do a damn thing about it. They sit here and say, I would love to see safe injection sites, but oh, you can't put it in my neighborhood. They say, I want to see that homelessness crisis thing done, oh, but you can't rehouse these people anywhere near me, the property values will go down. Hell to no. If we're going to actually change, if we're actually going to do something, it's time to elect people with a goddamn backbone, get rid of these goddamn capitalists, and go in your own self-fucking interest. And guess what? That's socialism and communism. Not these goddamn capitalists, not this bullshit that they continue to feed us, not all this, but it's pissing me off, and I'm getting really hyped right now, because right now, all we're doing is we're neck deep in propaganda. We're so consumed with it, so consumed with this idea that, oh my God, they speak the language of progressive. They don't say racist things, so they must be a good person without actually thinking about what their economic and housing policies have to do to the community at large. Get your head out of your ass for once and vote in the self-interest of not just you, but the community. We're a collective, not a group of individuals. Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, like, I feel like I'm constantly operating at that level of outrage, like, all the time. And so, you know, I'm being told by family and friends and everyone else that I have to calm down and I have to not be. But, you know, when I bring up these stuffs, I actually just met 2 new people who are, and through Pokemon Go of all things, who are socialists, and we play in Rhode Island. And like, we were having this conversation about how, like, you know, we have these conversations, and those of us who pay attention to the minutia and pay attention to the small details, and every single small detail adds up to compound our level of interest and also our outrage. So we're constantly outraged. We're constantly pissed off, and it's exhausting. And I know that it's exhausting, but I think that finding the key people like you guys and finding key people that you can have these discussions with is very important for everybody out there. And so, like, I know Brandon took the night off, and he deserves it, but he's missed, and I know that he needs that as well. So, you know, it's clutch that you find your squad and find your crew and find all the people that you can have these conversations with, and then take action. And Adair's doing that at local level. Richard's doing that at local level. I'm trying to do it at local level, because that's where we're going to make change. So turn the action, turn the outrage. Don't turn it down. Turn it into something else.
Yeah, I like that. Turning it into action is important, and I think that's really key.
And I apologize for my outburst, by the way.
No, don't, man.
Because we can't all always be at 10 all the time. We have to rest.
I can.
We have to take. We have to take it. So we could turn to you, Adair, to help express that. And I think that's important for everybody to have, like John said, to have those outlets, to have your own, juntos or whatever, your groups where you can go and just
comrades.
Yeah, exactly. Just talk about things and know that you're not crazy for thinking that what you're seeing doesn't make any damn sense, because it doesn't. Not with the story they're telling you. It doesn't. If you recognize what it is they're actually after, what they're trying to accomplish, and how they're trying to go about it, it all makes a lot more sense, and it makes you feel less crazy about the whole thing, I think, personally. And it can calm me down a little bit, but then, as John says, it spurs more curiosity, which spurs more outrage.
Yeah.
And
all right, so we got 3 minutes left. So, John, let me get your last words, and then I guess I'll wrap up the show. Please stay tuned. We're going to be doing the better half of the show. It will be on SoundCloud. So if you're not following us there, go to soundcloud.com/expand the discourse and check us out.
So I'm not gonna down on where I am, but what I've seen here is like it's a bunch of small groups who are carrying their own interests and caring about their own projects, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the effort they're going into it. But I'm seeing a lack of, I don't want to say leadership, but I'm seeing a lack of solidarity almost, because everyone's concerned with their own projects, and I think that we have to focus on the solidarity issue more and more as we go forward. So you can have your pet project. I have plenty of mine. But you need to think about solidarity, and you need to think about it and what that means. And that's not necessarily collaboration. I'm talking like true solidarity. And so going forward, I think everyone needs to talk about solidarity in their life, think about it in an abstract term, then try and apply it to their own life. And like we were talking about with like I was talking about earlier about crews, find your crew, create solidarity with them, and then create action with solidarity in mind towards an specific end goal. And treat it like you would if you had to put a business plan before a bank. Set goals, set timelines, set these things out, and move towards them. And that helps with the outrage. It helps with the feeling of helplessness and outrage. And that's all I got to say. Richard, you're up.
Yeah, definitely. With the feeling of helplessness, sometimes I think that's important. And when even if you're accomplishing small goals, especially if you're making impacts in your local community, but with like I think what John mentions, the solidarity is important. But if you can make real impacts, even if they're just small, it's starting the community garden, it's whatever, that helps you feel like you're making things at least a little bit better right there where you are and right in that moment. And that's good. But I think it is important that we move towards trying to take on bigger ideas, because what we're up against isn't going to be, a casual argument of ideas with the Democratic Party or with Republicans or with the establishment as it stands. What we're talking about is wrestling control from unwilling and unwanting participants. These are hostile actors that are going to fight at every turn and are going to try to use propaganda, supplant, use everything that they can within their power to try and stop any sort of progressive movement from actually taking hold and directing our politics away from the harsh and cruel capitalistic tendencies that we see today. And that's not going to be easy. It's going to be, personally, it's going to take risks, and it's going to involve a lot of putting yourself out there in ways that you may not feel comfortable with. And know that there's a lot of us doing the same thing where we can and when we can, and do what you can, even if that's just, sharing one of our posts or something from the Benjamin Dixon Show channel, or from Nick Nolan, or from a Noah from somewhere else, or from any of the progressive outlets that you find. Even if it's just sharing with people that you wouldn't normally share that opinion with, that can be being bold for the day, and doing little steps like that can really change the tenor of the conversation in this country. If people who really recognize how wrong things are start to speak up and say, hey, I'm over here in this spot and we see that it's messed up too. The more people that speak up, and the more people that see the people around them raising their hands, the more confident they're going to be to raise their hand and say, hey, I see something messed up over here too. This is how we can fix it, or this is what we can do to make something better. And so I'll leave with that.
I just want to add one thing to that. When I hear sharing, one of the things I see most is we need to start sharing in offline spaces, like in our lives and the people that we love. And those are the people that we need to start with, and then move on from there to create bigger groups.
Excellent.
So first, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. If you haven't checked out our SoundCloud already, go to soundcloud.com/expand the discourse. you look down below, I believe it should still be there. You're going to want to go to patreon.com/expand the discourse if you can, in fact, contribute to the show. All our current patrons, big shout out to you. We really appreciate you. Hit me on Twitter. I'll give you a follow back. But for my final thoughts tonight, I just really want to reiterate for folks, the fact of the matter is we talk so often about people who vote Republican voting against their own self-interest, while we never sit here and realize that when we vote for capitalists, we not only vote against our own self-interest, we vote against the collective whole self-interest. We vote against our children's self-interest. We vote against the interest of the planet. We put profit before everything else. That's all capitalists know how to do. So the fact of the matter is, it's time to seize means of production. It's time to stop sitting here and being idle. It's time. The only thing you have to lose is your change. Start working towards it. Join Democratic Socialists of America. Join the American Communist Party. But at the end of the day, it's about working together. It's about building community. It's about being a collective whole, not just a group of individuals. Solidarity today, solidarity tomorrow, solidarity forever. We out.